There's really nothing new in this assignment. There's no lists or anything from chapter 7, but it is tying together a few concepts that we've talked about and discussed, and specifically this idea of a superclass and subclasses. So we're going to have one superclass and multiple subclasses. Now, we've seen this time and time again in Greenfoot. In Eclipse, we've seen maybe one subclass, so now there's going to be multiple subclasses. So I'm going to step through some of this material, not give you the full answers, but at least give you kind of an idea of how to start and what we're expecting. So the directions are actually the hardest part of this. They're quite in depth, but they should really help you out quite a bit, because if you read the directions, they pretty much spell out exactly what you have to do. So we're going to have a superclass of player, and then baseball player, football player, and basketball player are going to inherit from player. And that makes sense, right? When we looked at the fruit examples, we had type fruit, which was the superclass, and then we had apple, orange, and a couple other fruits. It looks like we've got some private data members here for my player, and then your standard constructors, getter setters, and then we have an effector down here, calculate commission. If we look at baseball player, we're only going to focus on one of these subclasses for this demo, and everyone can figure out the rest. But essentially, you're going to add a couple more data members, and your standard stuff up top, and then you have your effectors down here where you're calculating some statistics or determining the status. So when you look at these items up here, you're not just guessing like, oh, is this going to be a double, or what is this going to be? If you go down to the requirements, it spells out exactly what each data member should be. So ID is int, it tells you these are strings, and then these are going to be doubles down here. Pretty much stuff you probably would have guessed, but it spells it out down here. So again, steering you in the right direction. The constructors, notice this is plural, it's not singular. One's the default with no parameters, and the other has all 6 parameters. So public getters and setters, that's pretty standard. And then, like I said, there's an effector to calculate the commission. So it even tells you how to do the math. So you multiply the salary with the commission rate, and this returns a double type. So let's focus on player for now. And another thing we'll keep in mind is part of this assignment is creating a UML class diagram. So we went over this in class a few weeks ago. There's a document on Moodle that shows you exactly how to download this stuff. I actually don't care what program you use to create these UML documents. In fact, you can do it in Excel, you can do it in Visio, you can do it in PowerPoint. I don't care. Whatever is easier for you. You will need to export the diagram as a picture, and that's going to be one of your artifacts that you submit. Step 3 is, after we get all of these things set up, then we're actually going to have a runner, something that runs all of these classes and creates objects and things like that. The directions, again, are robust, and they tell you exactly what the output should look like. So it's going to look something like this. Notice that there is some formatting that you need to do. So when I see this formatting stuff, I automatically look at these things here with, these have decimal points, so I'm probably going to have to do some formatting. I skipped one here. There's no new material. Like everything that we have done so far, you'll be able to complete this homework. So there's nothing like new or things you're going to have to invent. In fact, it says you don't need to use any abstract classes or methods because we haven't talked about that. So if we look at the player superclass, let's go ahead, and I've already got Eclipse ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call this player. I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to click finish. And there we go. So here's something that I've noticed people not doing, but what you should do is you should add comments, right? So I'm expecting comments now, like especially the headers. The headers are definitely necessary. So I have the file name and my name, the class, and then just a brief description. I mean, this takes 15 seconds to write all this, so shouldn't be that hard. It's not a huge ask. For class player, I need to get some instance variables. And these ones, I had some integers, some strings, and some doubles. And these were directly pulled from the Word document. Now what I'm going to need to do is what I'll do first is I'll create the getters and setters. So in Eclipse, they make it really easy, right? So I can right click, go to source, and then generate getters and setters. And when I do that, this dialog pops up and I want them for all of them. So I'm going to select all. And there's some insertion points and things that we've seen before. I want these all public. Go ahead and generate those. So all my getters and setters are there. So that's out of the way. The other requirements were to create some constructors. So I needed a default constructor and then a constructor that takes all of the private data members that we have. So if I go here and I go generate constructor using fields, I'm going to select all of them, make it public, and yes. And I'm actually going to select that. All right, so that's all of my data members in the constructor. And then I just need to add one more constructor, which is the default. There we go, I'm saving as I go. So I've got the default constructor, the constructor that takes all 6 data members, and the getters and setters. So the last thing I need to do is my effector. So if I go back to my Word document, there's this calculate commission. So let's see what this calculate commission. I multiply the salary with the commission rate, and I return a double type. Okay, salary times the commission rate. No parameters, and it'll still return the salary times the commission rate. So that's it for the effector. Player is completed. I have my superclass player pretty much is all set up and ready to go. Let's look at baseball player. Let's just do that one and see how we would go about creating something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new class. I'm going to name it baseball player. And you'll notice here it's asking for a superclass here. So I'm going to say player. That for now. And you see how it creates my baseball player that extends player requirements. So it looks like I need number of hits, number of times at bat. I go down to my baseball player. 2 private data fields are of int, 2 constructors. The other has all 8. There should be public getters and setters for the 2 private data fields. And then there's 2 effectors. So there's some calculations that are going to have to go on. We're looking at baseball player. What's the first thing I need for each one of my files and classes moving forward from now on? Yep, you guessed it. I need a program header. So I have one already pre-populated, and it kind of gives a rundown on what to expect in the class. This is especially important when you go to work for your companies because you're going to pick up code, have no idea what it does, and if they provide a brief description, it helps. So when you go to your companies, you'll pick up code from years ago, and if they provide a brief description, it gives you a heads up as to what you're going to be reading, and it's super helpful. So always put something like this in your code. All right, so we've got a couple private variables we need to include. So of type integer, and I'm going to declare them like this. And the constructors, so for the constructors, let's take a look at how we do the constructors with an extends player. The two constructors, one is the default with no parameter, and the other has all 8 to initialize the 6 inherited data fields plus the 2 private data fields, respectively. All right, so how do I do that in Eclipse? So I can write it out manually and just start typing a bunch of stuff, but that takes forever. So what I'll do is I'll go to my source, generate constructors from superclass. I'm going to select all, make them public, and generate. So check that out. So now I've got this public baseball player. You can call super. I'm just going to take it out. It really is not doing anything, right, because it's the default constructor. So for formatting purposes, I'll just try to get these over here. And then this is the cool thing here. So what this did was it put all of our data fields in, and it knows which ones need to be initialized in the player class. So there's 6 of them, right? So what we have to do is then add data types from our current class. So I'm going to put int num hits and int num times. And then this is just like our standard stuff that we've been doing for a long time. So num hits equals num hits, this dot num times equals num times, right? So it should look something like that. Then you'll create the getters, the setters, and the effectors, and I'll let you do all of that. So you'll do that for the baseball player, the basketball player, and the football player. And they're all pretty much the same. They kind of follow the same pattern. One of the interesting things is there's a little description within the document that says the 3 constant values mentioned in the determine status method as thresholds should be defined as public static final variables in the 3 subclasses respectively. So what is that talking about? So if we go to baseball player, you see this 0.25 is bolded. So at some point, we're going to use 0.25, and what we want to do is declare it like this: public static final double threshold equals 0.25. So now it is a static, so it belongs to the class. It's final, so in C++ that would be a constant, so it's not, you can't change this. It's in all caps, so that's a dead giveaway. And we declare it as 0.25. So somewhere down here in our effector, we're going to use this instead of hard coding at 0.25. And that's all that's saying. So you'll create some variables like this for the 2 other classes. Okay, now we have the last piece of this. So this is going to be the thing that actually runs our program. I'm going to call it Kevin Kelly 7 public. I want a public static void main, because that's where all the action is happening. And I'm going to click finish here. So there's my main right there. Again, the first thing that I do is I'm going to put comments in. So these are the comments. So what we're doing here is we're hard coding parameters into the constructors, and then we're outputting the instances. So for one of my baseball players, just see on one line here. This. So we're going to create a whole bunch of well, not a whole bunch. We're going to create 2 baseball players. I just called them baseball 1, and the other one would be baseball 2. But you see what I'm talking about with hard coding. So I just sent some values in, and this corresponds, of course, to this here, right? So that's how we're going to kind of set up our objects. So for the output of these objects, if you remember from our instructions down here, this would be the example output. So it would look something like this, right? The main thing is getting these things correct as far as the formatting. So if I were to start doing something like this in my program, the first line might look something like this. So I'm going to get the ID and print it out. And then, the second thing would be probably to get the name, which in this situation is Chris Jericho, and you would continue on. I think I accidentally got rid of one of my braces. So let's ensure this runs. Player ID 53, name is Chris Jericho. So hopefully that makes sense. So you're going to do that for, a few more players, output the stuff, make sure it's correctly formatted. Notice the use of the getters here. So I'm using getters. And that's pretty much it. So this program is going to be pretty, I think my sample program that I had, it's like 120 some lines, just because you have to, it's basically a copy and paste exercise, right? You're going to do this for baseball 1, and then, baseball 2 you're going to also do. So it'll look something like that. So hopefully that, so I just wanted to give you an overview of this homework. Hopefully this helps you. I didn't give you everything, but I at least gave you the high points that should help you get through this homework. Remember, I need comments now. I need headers on everything. You don't have to follow this format, but this is just something I came up with that I thought was useful. And I also need some comments that are, descriptive of what these things are. So one last look at our homework, and, you've got a bunch of these files. I think what would be forgotten the most is the UML. Make sure you remember the UML, okay? And this assignment is going to be worth 25 points, so this grading scale is going to adjust a little bit, but you can see, now you're going to have comments and things like this are going to be worth some points. The UML class diagram is going to be worth some points. So we're fine-tuning our skills, and I'm holding you to a higher standard now. All right, with that, I am open to email questions, any questions you have. Don't wait until, Sunday afternoon to do this. But anyway, best of luck.